You're listening to Frank Talks Pleasures and Lifestyles, and I'm Frank because I have to be. We're in studio today with Maureen Marovitch, who is a documentary filmmaker who did a documentary about her relationship with her partner David and their open relationship. Welcome back to studio, Maureen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Frank.
All right, let's talk about the documentary process. You had a crew practically living with you, following your every move. What is that like?
It sounds a bit like reality television, which was actually before the reality television trend. We filmed from '98 to end of '97 to 2000. Maybe it was a bit easier for us in a way because we were the directors of the film. So sometimes we were the documentary crew. We were all of it, me and David, and filming each other or people around us. Sometimes we actually did have a documentary crew outside of us. But we didn't have 24-hour-day cameras, thank goodness. We were able to turn them off. But it was a strange process. Sometimes David and I might be starting an argument, a real genuine argument. I'd say, you know what, stop. We have to stop. I have to go with the camera and record this. This is really important. That kind of thing where you're sort of living your life at the same time you're looking at it as an outsider, and how would this be part of a larger documentary? It was a very strange phenomena that I was very happy when it ended. And I have to say, the only thing we film now on videotape is we have a baby now, a dog 2-year-old, and she's the only thing that pretty much gets videotaped. We don't bother with our conversations anymore.
Were you ever intimidated by the equipment being around recording the conversations?
That's a good question. That's something I always wondered about people I'm filming myself. How much does a camera affect them? Can people really forget it's there? And I could never forget it's there. I don't imagine anybody does. But I think, pretty early on, we and probably most of the people we film decide that they're just going to be themselves and let the camera roll. And I know I can just appreciate how much trust anybody we film has to have in us to do that. In our case, we're the directors. We know no matter how horrible something is we say or how raw or emotional, there was always that option to get edited out. We didn't take that way. We had tough editors who wouldn't let us do that if we wanted to. But it's challenging to know there's a camera watching you and to just try to ignore that and just say what you would normally say. Sometimes it actually prompted us to go deeper, because with that camera in hand, I would ask David questions I might not normally go to. I would actually probe deeper because I knew as a documentary filmmaker I would ask this of a subject. I might not normally ask this of my boyfriend or my partner, but I would ask this if I had to make a good film. So I would go that extra step, I think. And I think it was good for a relationship, actually.
Really? You didn't find that it put an additional pressure on the relationship?
It sounds crazy. I know it sounds crazy. It did put a kind of pressure, but I guess maybe we, as other people do, you kind of rise to it. We did, and I think it allowed us to be extra honest and to ask those tough questions that maybe in a normal relationship with no camera there I would have skirted, or we would have skirted around. Because it's easy to avoid, I think, in any relationship. It's easy to avoid talking about tough things. If it's hard or painful or just tough, you don't want to do it. And here, I had a reason. I had to. I couldn't make the film without asking those tough or doing those tough moments.
And something you've already answered it, that you said you had tough editors. I was just curious as to how subjective it is to be the directors of the documentary as well as the subjects.
It's not at all subjective. It was a personal documentary, but I think it helped a lot that we had two editors who were not us, who could, and who weren't even polyamorous to start with. Seth Poulin and Susan Shanks. Susan's a really experienced editor. Seth is just starting out at the time, but they were great. Sometimes I might say, it isn't really that important, or we don't need this. And they say, what do you mean this is? And we're going to put this in, or vice versa. I would think something was just so interesting, and they'd say, it's not as important as you think it is. And that's in any film, that's good to have that extra set of eyes and objective look at your material. That is especially useful in a personal documentary when you might be tempted to gloss over something that's tough, or not want to reveal something about yourself, and someone says, you know what, I think we need to use this scene. I know it's hard, but I think you need to use it.
How much creative control did you really give your editors to decide what goes in and what doesn't?
Well, being the director, you know, that's you get to be, it's like a dictator. You know, it's almost spelled like dictator. You get to have the final say. But I guess David and I really, editors to us really do make up about half the film. You come with this. In our case, we came with about 80-something hours of material, a huge amount.
Wow.
And they help whittle that down into a crafted 90-minute film with you, and they're a big part of the process.